Hello everybody, my name is Ruby. Today we're going to be talking about project templates, default presets, and browser defaults in Bitwig Studio. So you've just opened Bitwig and this is what your default project is going to look like. However, if you're anything like me, you probably are going to spend the first 30 seconds to maybe even over a minute closing a bunch of things, right? Maybe you don't use the clip launcher. You work primarily in the arranger. Maybe you want the sidebar on the left to show samples instead of devices. Maybe you don't use this send and return down here. And the tempo you use probably won't be 110. I find myself working at 140 the majority of the time. Let's say you always find yourself using an instance of CRM2. So let's just load that up on a track here. There we go. We have an instance of CRM2. Let's get rid of these two for now. Say for whatever reason you always find yourself using a reverb on the master. Who am I to judge? We can save all of this to a template. That way, next time we open Bitwig Studio and create a new project, everything will be exactly as we have it right now. We're going to go up to File. We're going to click Save as Template. We're going to give it a name. And we're going to hit OK. Once that's done, we're going to go to the little Bitwig logo up here. We're going to go to Settings, Behavior, and then we're going to turn on Use a Template for New Projects. Then we're going to hit the button right here, and then we're going to find the one that we just made, which in my scenario is called New Template. Hit OK. And now, if we close this project, we go back to the main page and we make a new project, it's going to open exactly what we had before. Templates are going to save a lot of the UI panels as well. As you will notice, the sidebar opened here to my samples folder. However, it gets even more specific than that. If you open this and you browse to a specific location, such as the My Samples folder, and say maybe you want to drag this down, that way you have more folders than samples, or maybe you want to make it wider. Maybe you don't even want the browser to be open when you start a new project. You can do that. You can also hide the device view. Your loop points will also be saved. I tend to make mine start a little bit later in the project. That way I can create my loop here. And then when it's time to arrange, I have all this room beforehand to start creating an intro and or a build up to the song. This is just a very tiny attention to detail while creating templates, but if you hit Control, Shift, and A, it'll deselect everything. That way you have nothing selected in the project. And when you open a new project, you're going to get a completely blank slate. And not every template has to be your default one. You can create multiple different templates for different scenarios, and you can load them at any time by opening the Quick Start menu and then hitting the My Templates tab, and all of your templates will be right here. From here, you'll just click one and it'll open from there. So my usual template is pretty minimal because I find myself creating a lot of different genres and doing a lot of different things within Bitwig Studio. So my template is more generally applicable. For the most part, it's just this monitor bus and a master. I start with my browser hidden. However, when I open it, it opens to my own samples folder. And we'll get to this monitor bus in a second, but I want to talk about the master first. If we open this up, you'll see I have project-wide modulators right here, which I will get to in a second. I have a tool here for pushing gain into the master clipper and or limiter. By default, I have K-clip loaded, which is the limiter that I'm using the most currently. It's hard clipping at 0 in its multiband mode. Then I have an oscilloscope in the DAW here, and then I also have a plugin for the Minimeters server. Minimeters is an excellent metering plugin that I think is well worth the asking price of $20. I will link to a video going in depth on it in the description. And then the monitor bus is where it starts to get fun. By default, your master's output will probably be set to studio or maybe a specific output on your audio interface. However, mine is routed to the audio track that I have called monitor at the top of my template. When you export a song, you go to File and Export Audio, or you select down here in the master and you bounce a selection of time. It is going to pull straight from this master channel. So when we send it to the monitor, we can add more effects to it without it affecting the final export. Then on this monitor bus, we want to make sure that we set its output to studio. We want to hit this button in the bottom right corner, and we want to make sure that we have the main output of our audio interface selected here. If you don't see the right device here, you want to open the dashboard, go to Settings, Audio, and then go down here to your outputs, find the correct output, and make sure the speaker icon is turned on. This can be useful if you're using any sort of headphone correction or room correction plugins. I don't have anything like that, but I do have a few things here that are just useful for monitoring. And I, of course, have a hard clip at 0, just to be safe in case for whatever reason the master isn't hard clipping at 0. That's just to protect any gear that I'm monitoring on. And then I have a rolling sampler loaded, which is another third-party plugin that is going to be constantly recording the signal coming through it. This is useful during sound design or any sort of experimentation. where you can just highlight a selection of audio and drag it into your timeline, and it creates a file on your local disk. The reason I have this on the monitor channel is because I want to record sound exactly as I hear it. Then here in this test effects chain, that's what most of these modulators are going to be bound to. So starting off, I have a low pass, which is going to, well, low pass the whole mix. That way I can hear specifically just the lower subregion, which I find to be very useful in listening closer to the dynamics and the relationship between the kick and the bass. I have a mono toggle here, which is going to mute the side channels. That way you just hear what's in the middle. This is very useful when testing for less than perfect listening scenarios, such as phone speakers or maybe a cheaper Bluetooth speaker that only has one channel or anything of that sort. And then I have this stage test, which is not very scientific at all. It's kind of just there for vibes, but it is a set of different convolutions for different very large spaces that I have a modulator here to scroll through. I find the last one I ended up loading. I'm pretty sure all of these IRs are from Air Windows, but these are basically going to put my song in a huge fucking space that is terribly treated. That way I can hear how clear it comes across in a big stadium type scenario, right? Unfortunately, I do not have the privilege of testing my IDs out every other night on tour. And then the last modulator I have here is just toggling this master gain here. When I have multiple limiters, this is helpful because I can set them all at unity on the input gain. And then when I want to push my track louder, I just turn up the gain here, and then that'll push all of the clippers and limiters at the same time. This is a template that I have created that is a little bit more detailed. This isn't one that I use personally, but I think this shows more of what is possible with project templates. So this one is targeted more towards, electronic music. My main genre is bass music, like dubstep, trap type of stuff. So naturally, my templates are going to be focused more on mixing for loudness and things like that. So here I have a main drum bus, which has nothing on it. Then we have a kick and snare group. That way we can put our kicks and snares in there. And then a tops group, which is for cymbals, hi-hats, shakers, shit like that, right? I have a plugin that is here deactivated. I like to do this a lot for plugins that I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to use every time, because when you right click and deactivate a plugin in Bitwig, it fully unloads it. That way it's not using any system resources or adding any latency. However, the one added here is Kilohertz Compactor, which is a ring mod sidechain plugin, kind of. I have the release turned up a little bit on this one. That way it's not going to be as harsh as a true ring mod sidechain. However, if you want that sound, you just turn the release all the way down. It is taking a sidechain input from the kick and snare channel. This is going to take the hi-hats and stuff and ring mod them or duck them to the kick and snare, which is just going to make the kick and snare punch through in the mix a lot more. Then on the sidechain, I have another Kilohertz Compactor. This one doesn't have anything routed to it yet, but it is set up to be sidechained. So some people like to sidechain to both their kick and snare. Some people like to do just the kick. I have noticed both happen a lot. But if you want another one, you can just Control D, Command D, whatever, duplicate it, and you want to route these to whatever you want to duck to. Same as before, if you want that crunchier, more accurate ring mod sidechain, just turn the release all the way down or set it back to 5 milliseconds for a smoother sound. Here inside the sidechain group, I have a bass group. So when you're doing any bass sound design, you would put them in here. I have a sublimiter preset here, which I've created in M Dynamics MB, which unfortunately is another paid plugin. But if you really want to, you can make this in Bitwig's own band splitter, or you can do it with something like Multipass. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a limiter in the subregion to make sure that all of your different bass patches, the subs are going to be hitting at about the same. And then if you want more sub or less sub in your track, you just turn this up or down. Or you can use an EQ afterwards. It's really up to you. Then I have a clipper, K-Clip 3. You can use over, whatever clipper you like to use. And then here I have a useful preset I made a while ago called Sub Grabber. And basically what it is it's a band split here that has a mono toggle and a crossover control. But the idea is that there is a tool within the low band for another plugin to grab onto. I find myself in a lot of cases ring mod sidechaining things to the sub of a song. And doing that is kind of a pain in the ass if you have a bunch of different bass patches. So here, we're just creating a spot for the ring mod sidechain to grab onto that is just the subs of all of our bass. I do this on vocals a lot. So if we were to create an audio track here, open up a ring mod plugin, you can do input 3/4, turn the bias all the way up. You can do this with Kilohertz Compactor too. I'm just doing ring mod out of habit, but we got a sidechain, bass, and it's kind of messy tree to get through. But you go all the way through here to the clean sub out, and now this ringmon sidechain is going to be reacting to just the sub frequencies in this bass group, but because it's within a chain that has its mix all the way down, this crossover won't be audible at all. Now moving on, I have a vocals group, which just has an FX send in it by default because I tend to do my vocals that way. While I don't use sends very often for reverb and delays in whole tracks, I find they're very useful for vocals. And then I just have a peak limiter here. That way this doesn't go past 0 decibels. And you'll notice down here, I'm routing it into the sidechain master group. So you want to go sidechain master. And that's going to take the output of this and send it through the sidechain bus. That way it does get sidechained to the kick and snare or whatever you have triggering your sidechain. If you don't like your vocals to be sidechained, you just want to switch this back to master or whatever the parent group of vocals is if you want to do that. And then here in the ambience group, it's the same thing. It's just a limiter being sent to sidechain, and the same thing with the effects group. Up here, I have a utility group that is actually skipping the master and going straight to monitor with a reference track set to 0 decibels. On this utility track, I have another sub instance of mini meters that is going to be disconnected from the separate one that I run above my screen. This is going to let me monitor the spectrum and the loudness of whatever reference track I'm using. And it is important to make sure that it is also at 0 dB because that is the gain on our master. I have it set to create audio tracks at a lower volume by default. So I just want to make sure that that is 0. And then the master here is the same as what I normally do. Moving on to device defaults, it's pretty easy to create a default preset. You just want to right click the device and then click save as default preset. And that's going to make that device open in this state every time you open it. So real quick, I'm just going to run down and show you some of my favorite default presets that I use constantly. So there are some devices in Bitwig Studio that I think have some pretty ridiculous default settings that I always end up changing every single time. One of the biggest examples of this is Filter Plus. So I tend to switch this to push first of all, because I tend to just like that algorithm more. And then I turn the input gain to 0, turn it off. I can turn it on when I need it. Turning this down, the input modulation, whatever, 0. I think this is kind of weird, and I don't really understand why this is here. Having an LFO built into the device rather than using a modulator out here seems very antithetical to the whole Bitwig thing. Regardless of opinions on it, I just don't use it. So I always want to turn that off by default. I'm going to make sure this drive here is 0, which it is. I'm going to turn the resonance all the way down. I'm going to turn this all the way up. And I tend to switch it to Salin key because this one has the most options of different filter types right here. And then there's a bit of a hidden setting that's not in the inspector. I really wish they would put it in the inspector. But if you right click the background on a filter, there's actually a resonance limit here. I am not smart enough to explain to you exactly what this means, but in my experience, this is about the point that things start distorting. So if you're like me and you run shit really, really hot, things are going to distort and fall apart really quickly going into this filter. And for the longest time, I didn't understand why, and it's because of this hidden setting. Now, if you control click to type in a value, it actually goes away. This is a weird bug. This is happening on Bitwig 6 beta 4. But for now, you can just hold shift click, and I would like to bring this all the way up to 0. That way, it only distorts when it passes 0 on the input gain. Now, there is one more problem with Bitwig's filters. They tend to be somewhat analog modeled, I think, or it has something to do with making the resonance self-oscillating. They want it to feedback when you turn it all the way up, which is fine. But if you're like me and you slam things through OTT a bunch, look at that. There's a noise floor. If we had 2, that's pretty audible. So what I like to do to remedy this is in the pre-effects, we are going to add a tool. This is just something we're going to latch onto with another plugin. Then in the post effects here, we're going to add a gate. We want to set the device input to the Filter Plus pre-effects tool out right here. And then we want to turn the threshold almost all the way down, but not completely. Once we see this line jump up, that means it's going to start letting the noise through. So we're just going to turn it up a little bit after that. And we can find the sweet spot right there. -138. If there's anything below that, it's probably going to be inaudible anyway. Next, we're going to give it a small bit of release, like 10 milliseconds or so, just to smoothen the cut a little bit. We're going to turn the attack all the way down just to make sure the transients come through nice and clear. However, we can't make the attack 0. So we are going to add a little bit of look ahead to this by adding a time shift to the sidechain effects chain. We're going to set it to milliseconds mode. We're going to offset it by the amount of attack. So in this case, it's going to be -0.10. All right, so we can close that up. If we turn on these OTTs again, we can see that the noise is gone, and that gate will let the filter open back up anytime there's more sound coming through. So then we're just going to right click, save as default preset. And now, next time we open Filter Plus, it's going to be set up just like that. Next up on my list is the Saturator device. I'm more comfortable with the way that it works in Ableton, where it's fairly clean by default. So I think these settings are great for showing what Saturator is capable of, but they're pretty far from what I actually tend to use it for. So we're just going to double click all of these, set them to their defaults, all the way up at 0. The quiets don't matter too much because there's no ratio happening, but you can set them wherever you want. I'm going to turn off the auto gain here. I just wanted to pin it at 0, so we're basically soft clipping. I'm going to turn the filter off. I'm going to set the drive to 0. Then we can close this. And next time we open the saturator, when we drive it, it's just going to be a nice soft clipper like that. And if we want something more detailed, we can open it up and affect the settings here. Next up is Polymer. When I open a synth like this, I tend to want to start with an extremely basic sound. So I'm just going to switch this to a sine wave. I'm going to mute the sub, switch it to 0. And typically when I want a sub, I want it a sine wave. So I'm going to make sure that's just already a sine wave. I'm going to get rid of the filter modulation, open it up all the way, get rid of the resonance, switch it to a solid key like I did for the Filter Plus. I tend to turn off key tracking for filters unless I specifically want it. And then I'm going to turn this high pass filter all the way down. Unfortunately, you cannot turn it off, but you can take it down to 19.4 kilohertz, which is close enough to not affect most sounds. And of course, you can set default presets for any third-party devices as well. M-Dynamics MB is one of my favorite plugins, but these presets in the quote-unquote easy screen are pretty terrible in my opinion, at least in terms of user interface, and they're often not what I'm going for. If we open up the edit tab, we can see here it's already doing a bunch of processing. So what I would like is to open M-Dynamics MB to a completely blank slate already in this edit screen. This is going to work for any Melda plugin that has these easy screens, but you want to go to presets, root, you want to look for default. And this is going to do almost nothing to your sound. It should null for the most part, unless it's something like M-Dynamics MB that has crossovers. And then when we're on this screen, we just want to save this as our default preset. And the next time we open it, we're going to go straight to that edit screen with a clean slate to work from. And lastly, I just want to talk about the pop-up browser defaults within Bitwig. So if we hit this little button here, this is our browser. And this is in the context of a new audio channel. Say if for whatever reason, when adding an effect, you don't want all of these random presets to also come up. You just want to see the devices. You can go to File Kind, Plugins, and we're also going to select Devices because this is going to show all of the stock devices, but this is going to hide all of the presets. Then we can right-click in the blank space back here, go to Browser Settings, and use current selections for this context. And so now, next time we create a new audio track and we want to add something, it's going to save that setup that we had in the filters here. That is all for today. If you found this video helpful, I would appreciate a like and maybe subscribing to the channel. Stay tuned for more Bitwig content, and I'll see you all next time.